Hello and welcome back to the first official extra pod of the season. We've already had one, but that was a little pre-season one in a studio, had the luxury of that. We've had over 2 months off, if my calculations are correct, and we're raring to go, or at least I am anyway, starting with our season opener at Oxford United on Saturday, which is a good old 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff, exactly as it should be. So, as always, you know the script now with Extra. To play the game of Who the Hell Are You? Basically, this week we've got a returning guest, which is Si from the Oxford United podcast, the Fence End Pod. How are you doing, Si? You all right?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, I think we're just saying off air, I'm kind of missing the football now. I'm actually raring to go. Are you feeling the same way?
Yeah. It was a long summer. You kind of, at the end of the season, you need to recharge your batteries, but sort of by the time you get to hit July, it's like, right, I want the season to start now.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like I wanted a good 6 months to recharge my batteries after that last 5 seconds of that bloody playoff final. But you get 4 weeks in and you just think, right, let's get mucked into it. And you have all that optimism of a brand new season. But by this time next week, we're probably going to be wishing it was away, aren't we?
Yeah.
One of us, anyway.
One of us, yeah.
So, since we've played absolutely 0 games or league games so far this season, let's have a little look at your summer signings. 2018 for yourself went reasonably well after starting really, really bad. Slowly improving, finishing 12th. Now, your transfer window, for those who don't know, is as follows. You brought in Ben Woodburn today on loan, Chris Cadden, who was a target for us as well, I think he's from Columbus Crew, but spent last season on loan at Motherwell.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Allardyce, not the Sam Allardyce, but his grandson, I believe.
Yeah, either grandson or nephew. I'm not sure, yeah.
We've got Kevin Burko from Wolves, Tariq Fosu from Charlton, and probably the one that stands out most for me, Alex Gorin, who, if people don't realise, was one of our academy players, did quite well at Motherwell last season. So I suppose my question to you, Simon, what have you made of the transfer window in terms of your incomings?
At the moment, we're a bit light on numbers, but if the forums and Twitter are to be believed, we've got sort of 4 or 5 coming in the next week or so. It's been very, very quiet until today because Gorin, Fosu, and Cadden came in reasonably early in the transfer window, and then we've been kind of chasing players. Marcus Brown, who we had on loan last season, we put a bid in for him, but he's ended up at Middlesbrough. So we've kind of been, the fans are getting slightly restless, but Woodburn signing today is quite a good one, although we lost Gavin Whyte. He went out to Cardiff today. So it's kind of Gavin Whyte out, Woodburn in. And the potential signings that people are mentioning, I think if we can get 3 or 4 of them, we'll have done. I think it'll be a pretty reasonable transfer window, to be honest.
Who is the potentials that you've got, and is there any chance of any of them coming in by Saturday? We're speaking on Tuesday for the record.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the names mentioned on our forums are like Elliot Moore from Leicester, who's a centre half, Dan Aguier from Burnley, who's a young striker, Aribi from Forest, who we looked at a couple of years ago, and he was at Chesterfield. So there's it's sort of young players who might not be that much on people's radars, but that's where we seem to have been shopping. Certainly the last sort of 5 or 6, apart from the Pep Clotet era, we were very much looking at young talent from bigger clubs to sort of resurrect their careers, kind of thing.
And how has, I think you mentioned before, I know Woodburn obviously only signed today, so he hasn't really played, but I've kept a little bit of an eye with you being our first opponents and stuff. And Chris Cadden's probably one that people would want to know about, and also Alex Gorin, because obviously Alex Gorin, ex-Sunderland, I think he got released by our academy and has found his way back. Chris Cadden, though, was, I think, someone who was on our radar when there was a possibility of Mark Campbell having some kind of, I don't know whether it was a takeover or I think it was more along the lines of investment, because he was on the radar of John Park, who was going to be the new head of recruitment, if I am to be believed correctly. So Chris Cadden actually sounded quite good, and obviously me living up in Scotland, I know a tiny bit about Motherwell, and I know Alex did quite well last year, and I think Chris did make some waves. So how have they performed in pre-season?
Yeah, pre-season's always a tricky one to sort of gauge. The first pre-season game we had up at Rangers, we lost 5-0, but that was our first game of pre-season, and they were pretty much into their pre-season because played the Europa League qualifier on the following Tuesday or Thursday. So they were, well ahead of us. And we've had a patchy sort of pre-season, but I think a lot of it is down to lack of numbers. We've had a lot of youngsters play, a lot of the under-23 squad, and some of the under-18s have been playing. For example, we brought on, I think, 4 17 or 18-year-olds up at Rangers at the same time they brought on Jermaine Defoe. So it's, not really a fair fight. But so it's been okay as a pre-season. We've not pulled up any trees, but the Fulham game last week, Cadden play, looked quite good. Gorin and Fosu looked good. It's difficult to tell until you're into the the real season.
Yeah, most definitely. I think you mentioned before about Gavin Whyte going as well. Obviously, Gavin Whyte was one of the names that I picked out straight away when you look at the players that you've lost. But the big one for me was obviously you've lost your captain in Curtis Nelson, I think Harvey Bradbury, and you've released Jonathan Abika as well. So not a big amount of names that you've lost, but the biggest names you could lose potentially in terms of Curtis Nelson, especially. Are you worried about the loss of like your captain, and also I think Gavin White's, we seen last year, he looked quite decent, didn't he?
Yeah, Whyte is I think he'll be a big miss. He's gone to Cardiff, and he came to us last season in the summer from Crusaders out in Ireland, and was playing sort of semi-professional. He wasn't full-time, and he's taken a little bit of time to adapt to full-time football effectively. And there were times when he looked absolutely electric, but then he'd miss the odd game through sort of fatigue. I think where you've got players that have played in academies from a very young age and do pre-seasons every year, year in, year out. They might only be 19, 20, but they'll have done 5 or 6 proper pre-seasons. And he just looked like he needed a bit more fitness, a bit more endurance, a bit more sort of stamina. But I think perhaps in a couple of seasons' time, if Cardiff haven't gone back up into the Premier League, I think he'll move on to a big Premier League club, because he's got pace to burn, which absolutely frightens defenders, and 2-footed as well.
What's your thoughts on Curtis Nelson? Because I quite fancied us to bring him in. Because obviously we need reinforcements, but the move to Cardiff, maybe it's my ignorance, but I've been surprised by the players Cardiff have brought in. They've looked very much towards League One, and they took two of your players as well.
Yeah. Curtis, I didn't realise until the end of the season he played every single minute of every league game for us last season. I think it was only one player in the Football League who played more minutes than him. So his fitness had been an issue in the past. He had a couple of injuries, but last season he was superb. You mentioned him being captain. He was captain the previous season, but because I think he hadn't signed a new contract, there was a little bit of a kind of, they took the captaincy off him, but it made no difference to how he performed. He was absolutely spot on with his attitude all season. And he's another player, I think, who could go further than Cardiff. If Cardiff don't get into the Premier League, I can see him moving on as well. I think he will be a big miss, because he was a real talented footballer.
Both our chairman and our director, Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven, are both Oxford fans. I don't think it's any secret.
No.
And I think when it comes to sort of certain players that were linked to with Oxford, it wouldn't surprise me if the names have kind of came from there. Chris Maguire being obviously the one we had last season. So I think Curtis Nelson, we sort of had we kind of hoped, some of us anyway, that he would come in, and we ended up getting Jordan Willis. But obviously he's getting the move towards Cardiff. It does indicate that potentially he has got that ability to go up, because he's still quite young, isn't he? He's still only 24, 25.
Yeah, he'd had sort of 4 or 5 seasons at Plymouth as a captain there. He came through their youth setup and played sort of full time for them, regular starter for them from quite a young age. So yeah, he's still got a lot of football in him, and if he stays fit, he'll be some player. And I think a lot of Oxford fans thought he might end up at Sunderland, with, like you say, with the connection there with Stuart Donald, knowing what he can do.
With the team, when I look at Oxford, and last season you give us sort of 2 good games. I think maybe the game down at your place, we could have maybe I should have put you away first half, but that was story of our season last year. I think the home game at the Stadium Light, I think you were far and wide the better side. I think we did quite well to come back into it. But the more I watched Oxford over the season, because there were certain players you could really pick out, and we've just picked out two there, Nelson, Whyte, you mentioned Browns, but obviously you've lost, in my opinion, your best defender, but you've always looked quite weak up top, and it's been like a good midfield. I mean, your midfield looked all right in pre-season from what I've seen and what I've read. You've got, I think, Tariq Fosu, Gorin, and I think Brannigan, who's probably, in my opinion, a key player. But I noticed the other day that Karl Robinson pretty much was like, he looked like he was going to break down in tears when he was asked what about players coming in. And I've got to be honest, you look on paper quite weak up top up until obviously Ben Woodburn signing today, but you've got quite a strong midfield, a good goalkeeper. You've lost a bit in your defence, but you just don't have anyone that's going to score you 20-25 goals a season.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. We've got lots, and we certainly, with Marcus Brown last season, Jordan Graham as well played, and Luke Garbett, who were all on loan. And although Garbett was a fullback, he'd pushed on and played sort of wide midfield. Yeah. We've got, there's probably, I don't know, you could argue 8 players in that sort of midfield or attacking midfield. James Henry, we've only got Jamie Mackey up front at the moment. We're looking at signing, a couple of signings coming in, definitely light up front. Midfield, no problem at all. I think we've got a really strong midfield. The back four, I think with a centre half, if we can get this Elliot Moore, who seems to be the name that people are mentioning on the forums, but if we can get him in, I think we'll be okay. Defensively, that'll do us. But we do need goals. We haven't had a goal scoring centre forward for probably for sort of 2 or 3 seasons at least.
One thing I did want to pick your brains about that, I've just reminded myself, the last time we spoke, you just signed Jerome Sinclair, and he obviously helped set up the equaliser against ourselves at the Kassam, which I think was like the 90th minute. But he actually did it all right for Oxford, didn't he? He didn't do a bad job.
No, once he got a bit of football, rather than just making the odd appearance off the bench. Once he sort of started 2 or 3 games, and he looked like a threat. I think we were in for him during the summer. Definitely, he's gone abroad on loan. I think Holland, which you can kind of. I think a lot of the Premier League clubs are sending their players, more and more of them going abroad. Like I say, it's Elliot Moore who we're looking at from Leicester. Hasn't played for Leicester's first team, but he's been at out in Holland, I think, or Belgium, again on loan for a couple of seasons. So I think players are more sort of open to playing in Europe now, rather than just going on loan to lower league English clubs. They're kind of going abroad more. So we were looking at Sinclair. He improved as the season went on. I think a lot of fans would have quite happily had him this season as well.
Just looking at Elliot Moore just there, just in case he does sign, I noticed he's playing, it's the Belgian First Division.
That's right, Belgium. Yeah.
Playing for a team that I cannot pronounce, but if you Google it...
Leuven, I think, is how it's pronounced.
Leuven. Oud Heavily Leuven is the full name. It's a merger of 3 clubs, which I cannot pronounce any of them. So I will avoid that. In reference to Karl Robinson, he looked like he was going to cry, like I was saying before, during the week. Do you think come the end of the week, then he's going to be a little bit happier?
I think so. Yeah, it's funny that we're just done the Fence End podcast, and a couple of the guys on that sort of read that slightly differently to how some of our fans had kind of read it. And it's interesting. He was not particularly well received as when he came to us as a manager. A lot of people didn't like him. In the last sort of week or 10 days, there seems to be an awful lot of love for him because of that interview. It's kind of like they see him being very much sort of like the spokesman for the club almost. He's doing an awful lot, and you can kind of tell he's working his nuts off to get signings in, and they're not quite happening. Whether we're setting our sights just that little bit too high and we've missed out on players, it's a fine line you tread between getting players in but getting the quality in, and I think we've had to wait a little bit to get these players in, and I think if we can get the players in that we seem to be looking at, I think he'll be far more relaxed, next week once it's all done.
Yeah, even I felt a bit concerned for him when I was watching it. So if there's any Sunderland fans that haven't seen the video, he genuinely looks like he's tearing up.
Yeah.
Like it's quite sad actually, isn't it? It's like I'm not surprised you've kind of like want to put an arm around him a little bit because he looked
Yeah.
really sad about it.
I think that it shows, how much he cares about football. And
Yes.
I guess that's the same for pretty much every manager. They're trying on limited budgets at this level. They can't just throw huge amounts of money around. They've got budgets to balance, and they're trying to get players in. They're dealing with agents. They're dealing with clubs. They're dealing with players who are saying, "Well, I might come, or we'll see what other offers I get." It's a real, it must be tough, really tough.
You mentioned before about your pre-season. Obviously, there's a lot of results. You've played quite a few pre-season games compared to us, but there was 3 results that I picked out. There was the 5-0 at Rangers, which is, if I'm honest, I personally went to see Rangers against Derby, who were a very good championship side on Sunday, and they looked good. Their goalkeeper was the only thing that stopped that being 3-0. But a 2-1 defeat to QPR, obviously the division above, but I'm not too sure how good QPR are. But the big one was a 3-0 defeat to Eastleigh. So, in a way, it doesn't sound like great preparation, although there's been a few wins in there as well. But I think we've not had a great pre-season either. Do you read much into pre-season, or do you think it literally is that old cliche, it's just about fitness?
It is just about fitness. We've had players who absolutely set the world alight in pre-season, and when it came to the real thing, were useless. And we've had players who look absolutely rubbish in pre-season who turn it on when it really matters. So I think it is more sort of fitness. It's an opportunity to perhaps try players in slightly different positions and give them a run out. And it's just getting fitness, really, I think. So I'm not too concerned about the results. Some of the performances have been pretty good, and certainly against Fulham, second half we look pretty good. So I think it's improving as we've gone along.
Yeah, and I think if you look at your results to begin with, it probably gives you an outlook of exactly what pre-season is like. You lose 3-0 to Eastleigh, but you drew 1-1 with Fulham, who are just relegated from the Premiership. So if there's any Sunderland fans worried about us not scoring goals, try your best not to worry. I'm trying my best not to worry, but you sometimes do read into things too much. Now, as many people know, I do 3 players to watch, sort of for every team that we play. 3 that I picked out were pretty similar to what I picked out last year, with one slight difference. I picked out Alex Gorin, based on the fact that he's ex-Sunderland, and that worries me. Simon Eastwood as your goalkeeper, and Cameron Brannigan, who I think was probably your best player last year. Is there anyone else we should be worried about outside of those 3?
No, I think those 3 are pretty important. Simon Eastwood has been exceptional for us for sort of 3 years, and Brannigan, I think more of our fans will be worried if Brannigan goes than Gavin Whyte, to be honest. I think he's moved forward from a slightly deeper midfield role when he started to a more of a number 10, and I think he's really blossoming. We've got a lad, Chandon Baptiste, who played up at your place. I think he was the guy that was tackled for the sending off, and he's a player. Yeah, he got injured at Bristol Rovers not that long afterwards. He had a shoulder injury which took a long time to heal. Came back for the Brentford game in the Cup in early January. Came on as a sub, and within a few minutes had a freak injury and tore knee ligaments and was out for the rest of the season. So he's almost like a new signing for us. He hopefully will be. I don't think he'll be ready for Saturday, but he's certainly getting close to fitness. And he's a lad that has come through the youth ranks. So yeah, I think Woodburn will be one to look at now we've got him. Fosu has always looked good at this level, and Brannigan's improving every game.
Yeah, I think there's a few times I've watched Brannigan, and obviously coming from a Liverpool academy, you have that cliche like the same Man United. You don't spend time at Man United if you haven't got something about yourself. Same with Liverpool, but you do have that worry that when a player gets released, are they going to be any good? But I think Brannigan's probably found a club where he can blossom, get games under his belt, and he looks at least championship level every time I've seen him, or to be championship level.
Yeah.
And I think again that I think that's where the match is won and lost on Saturdays in the midfield. But one big thing I noticed about your opening fixture last season, if I remember rightly, we did the home podcast, and I think you'd lost about 5 out of the first 6. Came to our ground, played really well. Everything was fine after that. So I thought, I bet you'd like hope they've got a better start to the season this year. And without blowing our own trumpet, I don't think anyone would like Sunderland away first game of the season. But then I've noticed your next three are also really tough as well. You've got home to Peterborough, who I've tipped for promotion. You've got away to Blackpool, who are a good side and are reinvigorated because the Oystons have gone. And you've got a home game towards Burton. Are you worried a little bit that your season may mirror the start you had last year and you might have to play catch up again?
Possibly, although I think we were low on numbers later than this last year. So I don't think we can start as I'll jinx it. I don't think we can start as poorly as we did last season. You never know. We went to Barnsley and they absolutely blew us away first game. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen again. Obviously, with you being one of the favourites, it's going to be a tough game, that's for sure.
So I suppose my next question after that would be, for Oxford, you finished 12th last season. Good position in essence, considering how you started, but there is players in that team that have just gone towards Cardiff. You've got a lot of players that we were speaking about before. I rate quite highly, I think, are highly rated in League One. So what would success next season be for Oxford in terms of league position?
I think we should be challenging for a playoff place. I think that's a realistic aim, and an aim, the sort of size of the budget, the players we've got, the progression that the club wants to make. We really should be targeting playoffs. I think automatics is going to be a little bit beyond us with the strength of some of the clubs in this division. But I don't see any reason why we can't challenge for a playoff place if we make the signings that we're hoping to make.
Definitely. I think, when I look at Oxford's team, as I was just stating before, I think you're missing a centre forward and probably a solid centre half from a solid, at least top 10 team. And I think all Sunderland fans who watched the Oxford games last year will agree there's definitely stuff in there, definitely players in there that can damage a lot of League One teams. And I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I think the league was actually really strong last year.
Yeah, and it's sort of looking at how teams perform. You look at the Championship. There's always the same-ish sort of clubs up there. The sort of the ex-Premier League clubs, and the Premier League, with the exception of that Leicester season, Leicester City winning it one year, it's the same clubs. At League 2 and League 1 level, the clubs that were promoted sort of last season, Luton, Barnsley, Charlton. Luton had got back-to-back promotions. Barnsley went straight back up, and Charlton have been hanging around League 2 for League 1 for a little while. And it's the same with the clubs that have come up this season as well. Lincoln were promoted, then missed out on the playoffs, then promoted again, and Tranmere back-to-back promotions. So and MK Dons kind of more or less straight back up. So I think you can't always tell what these leagues are going to be like. I think because the finances are a little bit sort of closer, if you can pick up a rough diamond that has a massive influence on your team, whereas I think in the Premier League and the Championship, it's big squads. It kind of it does level out to the money that's spent. It goes pretty much on budget.
No, very much so. I was doing a League One review sort of over the past few weeks, just adding to it when players sign, people, the ins and the outs, and the amount of free transfers and loan signings that exist in this division. I'll admit I was getting frustrated that we brought in just free transfers in Conor McLaughlin and Lee Burge, and I was like, spend a bit of money. But when you start looking through the teams, apart from Gavin Whyte today, and I think Freddie Ladapo, and also I think Will Vaulks, and obviously Matt Clark, who have left League One, there's very little money being spent in League One. And I think there's very little money spent in League One all of the time. It is a lot of free transfer signings, because I think a lot of players around this league sign short-term contracts, don't they? Like 2-year contracts. If they do well, they get moved to a bigger League One club or the Championship. Yeah,
you're right. There's not much in the way of transfer spending at this level. It's far more, picking up out of contract players far more, like you say, because they're on short-term contracts. So, you can wait for players to run down a contract a lot easier than, Premier League players on 5 and 6 year deals. So yeah, it does happen. It is more wheeling and dealing and picking up free transfers.
Which brings me on to budgets. There was a lot made about ours last year, a lot made about how big our budget was and how much money we'd spent and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was a little bit blown out of proportion at points. I think the fact that we had players like Lee Cattermole and Brian Oviedo on Premier League contracts was not, you can't say it wasn't necessarily our fault, but you don't expect us to plunge that far deep. But in terms of what we actually spent and the players we had at our disposal, a lot of them had spent a lot of their career in League One. The likes of Charlie Whyte, Will Grigg, we might have spent big on them, but they were League One players. Same with Chris Maguire, who although did come in on a free transfer. But we didn't manage to get out of League One, which I would still say is a failure based on the team that we had last year. And I think there's a lot of fans still reeling from that. We've got a little bit of a hangover. Were you surprised that Sunderland didn't get promoted last year, or were you not that surprised based on how hard this league can actually be?
There's a kind of a yes and a no answer to that. It's sort of yes, surprised that a club of Sunderland's size with the budget they had, the spending big money on the likes of Will Grigg, that they didn't go up. You would look at it and go, well, really, they should be. You were big favourites to go up, and for it not to happen is a bit of a it is a failure, like you say. Yeah. But then I think at this level you're up against sort of canny operators who've been at this level for a long time. In a similar way to ourselves when we went into the conference, you're the big club. I think we were the first club to have won a major trophy to have gone out of the league. And to go into sort of places you've never heard of. Almost village sides in some instances, and it took us years to get out of the conference. We were flying at the start of the first season, but missed out, and it takes a long time to get out. And you're up against teams in League One and players in League One who've been there and done it and are kind of battle hardened. And it's not an easy division to get out of, because there are clubs coming down, the likes of yourselves and Ipswich this season, and then you've got smaller clubs coming up who've been in the conference but are on a run. They're on a run of sort of 2 or 3 years of progression. So it's a tough division.
And you kind of almost don't want to say this because it can come across as arrogant as a Sunderland fan, if I'm honest. But do you think it is true that teams, and did you feel it with Oxford, teams do raise their game when they play Sunderland? Or did last season anyway?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think sometimes you're at a stadium that's... like I say, on a smaller scale, it was the same when we were in the conference. I know we've only got 3 stands, but it's still a proper setup. And I think it probably subliminally the players lift their game. Perhaps not so much with the fans, because as fans we've followed our club for a long time. And we were a Division 1 Premier League as it is now team for 3 years, so we've been to all the grounds and that. But perhaps for some of the players, for them, if they've not been playing, if they're not Premier League players, if we pick them up from non-league or League 1 and 2 to come to the Stadium of Light, that must lift them definitely.
So I suppose I know the answer to one of this. I know one part of the answer to this, should I say. But which 3 Sunderland players are you most concerned about on Saturday? And I know for a fact which one of them is going to be.
I hate to say it. I'm one of these sort of fans who more worried about our players. I think, but certainly, Chris Maguire is one of those players. If Will Grigg plays, and he's still there, isn't he? He hasn't left.
Oh, yeah, you'll be fine if Will Grigg continues this form he's had since he's signed. But hopefully, he shuts my mouth and proves me wrong. But so I hold my breath. Yeah, no,
if I think we'll all sort of like to see Chris Maguire play. If he gets a couple of goals, fine. As long as we get 3, I'll be more than happy to for that to happen. So yeah.
And McGeady obviously potentially may be fit.
Yeah. I think he's having sort of seen him a few times. He's quite similar to Gavin Whyte. Very, very quick feet. And an absolute sort of horrible player to play against, because he's quick and defenders hate that.
Frightening at this level, if I do say so
myself. Yeah.
So I suppose just to finish off, just to touch on, I think one thing I always ask, score prediction and how you think the game's going to go.
I'm hopeful for a point. I think 3 might be pushing it a bit, and I just hope we don't do what we did at the start of last season and get absolutely tonked. So a prediction, either a draw or a narrow defeat.
I'm gonna have to start positive, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a 3-1. Will go cat rec. Oh God, I can't believe I got on record. But I'll take a 3-1. But I'm gonna regret that. Will Greg prediction? No, I'll stick with it. It's fine. It'll be all right. It's fine. It's fine. He's gonna prove me wrong. It'll be all right. But Simon, thanks for coming on as always again. As I always say, I won't wish you luck on Saturday. But are you coming up?
I am. Yes. Yeah.
What's your attendance expected?
It's tricky. They've sold out of some of the coaches. I think they're putting some more coaches on. Hopefully, what did we bring last year? About 1,200. About 1,200 last year. First game of the season, you kind of expect more, but then you've also got people on holidays. So I hope we bring 1,000 again. So yeah.
Well, enjoy your day, but don't enjoy the match. All right?
Yeah, will do.
Cheers, Simon. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.